Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, and I hope you're doing well today. I have here a film review of a After Dark Horror Fest movie. This movie came out in 2006 in the first wave of After Dark Horror Fest. It was written by Craig Singer and Robert Dean Klein, and it was also directed by Craig Singer. And the film in question is Dark Ride. Now, I heard about this movie from my good friend Night of the Living Dude, who also goes by Strange Michael sometimes. He's a great fellow. You guys should go watch his content. He's a great creator, and I love it when he recommends movies that I never heard of, or maybe do remember seeing back in the day at Blockbusters that I never checked out. Sometimes we have that relationship where he'll check out something that I watched that he never watched, vice versa. And I have to say thank you for putting this on my radar, because I never knew that there was a Carnival slasher movie in the 2000s vein of slasher movies. And I was like, I'm kind of a sucker for this time period. I grew up watching movies on rental like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake in the beginning. I grew up renting See No Evil with Kane. The Hills Run Red. I used to see that all over the place in Blockbuster. My Bloody Valentine 3D, Friday the 13th remake, the list goes on. And there's so many movies that get lost in the shuffle, especially when you're at a young age. I kind of wish I can go back in time and just watch all the movies coming out. But I do remember this thing called After Dark Horror Fest. And it was initially a 4-year run from 2006 to 2010. And then randomly again in 2015, where this film festival of sorts will go to mainstream movie theater lines for 1 week only in the year. And they would debut 8 horror films that were essentially deemed too out there or scary for theatrical release. And normally these movies would have, maybe $1 million to $5 million budgets, and they'd be lucky to get back, $500,000. But they did so to at least bring some money back in for these creators, because most of these movies would have gone straight to Lionsgate's, the parent company that helped the festival. It would have gone to their straight-to-video format anyway. So, Dark Ride was part of the first inaugural installment of After Dark Horror Fest. It went on to do 3 more in succession, 2 through 4, and then, like I said, a 5th one in 2015. Out of these sets of films, I've only seen 3 at this point. This is the 3rd one I've watched. I've seen also Lake Mungo and The Butterfly Effect 3. And I think those are the only other 2 that I've ever been that interested in watching. But I took this, film like I might go into this loving this or something. And I came out liking it. I don't quite love this movie, but I love that it has this mid-2000s vibe to it. There's something about it that might not be special to some, but it's one of these movies, and I kind of correlate this to how I feel about Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, the theatrical cut. This is a quintessential style over substance movie, and you should take it that way before you ever go in to watch this blindly. Go into enjoy the emotions it brings out from its atmosphere and its style that it brings. Don't go in there for story. So there you go. With that being said, let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. And I have a lot to say about this movie here. So, this movie starts off in a prologue of sorts, set in 1989 in Asbury Park, New Jersey. It takes place on the boardwalk that New Jersey is quite famous for. If you've ever been on the New Jersey boardwalk on the Atlantic coast, there are many different sections of said boardwalk. You have Atlantic City, and then you have what became popular from Jersey Shore, not too far away, in Seaside Heights. And then you have places like Asbury Park on the coast that is pretty much like a Coney Island of sorts. And it's kind of, synonymous with carnival culture. And the movie starts off with these 2 young girls. They are going into the end of season in Asbury Park, and they see this place known as a dark ride. And if you don't know what a dark ride is, it's a catch-all term for a ride at a carnival that is horror themed. And this location is a place that one of the girls is fascinated by, but the other's too chicken shit to go inside. And after coercing her friend to go in with her, they decide to go in and ride this ride before the seasonal close happens. And as the girls ride the ride, let's just say something grisly happens to one of these little girls, involving maybe a masked maniac known as Jonah, who runs the ride inside of the attraction. And the other girl has something happen to her off camera. Well, we cut in sometime into the future. Now, the film is super fucking vague about how far this goes into the future. Supposedly, it's nearly a decade in some parts of it, and then in some other parts, characters are saying it happened 20 years ago. So it's either 1999 or around 2009 where this film takes place, even though this film was filmed in 2006. If it is 1999, we have some problems here, but I kind of see it with the fashion choices. But we get caught up to speed at this college in Louisiana, of all places. And these two horny college guys, one is played by Patrick Renna. If you don't know who Patrick Renna is, if you've ever seen The Sandlot and you know who Ham is, there you go. He's probably most famous for that role, but he also starred in movies like Son-in-Law, The Big Green. I recognize him as a voice actor from various cartoon shows I grew up with, like Recess as well. So Patrick Renna is a fun little nod to see in here. But nonetheless, these two guys, I think they're named Bill and Steve. Patrick Renna plays Bill and his friend is Steve. They are talking about going on a road trip, and Bill has kind of said, why don't we go up, north and just drive around and see what we can find out there. It's fun. There's a lot of girls. I don't know why they're going on spring break, because it's a spring break movie. Why they're going from Louisiana all the way to New Jersey, who fucking knows, but it's just a thing in the movie. And they get this bright idea to maybe ask these girls to come along. And these other two girls are played. One of the girls is in the Sopranos show, Jamie Lynn Sigler, I think that's her name, or Sigler. And then there's Jennifer Tisdale, who play these other girls. And Jennifer Tisdale, if you don't know, is Ashley Tisdale's sister. If you don't know who Ashley Tisdale is, if you've ever seen High School Musical, she plays Sharpay. So that's a fun fact. Well, these two girls are kind of looking for a fun thing to do on spring break. They have nothing planned. These guys end up meeting them in the courtyard, asking them if they want to tag along. And they go to their other friend, and I forget the other guy's name. I want to say his name is Jim. This guy, whoever plays Jim, I can see his name if I see it. Hold on. I think it's Alex Solowitz or David Rogers. It's one of those people. This guy, he's an extra in a lot of things from the early 2000s. And it's fun seeing him here. He has the funniest fucking facial expressions I've ever seen. He has the van that's pretty much available for the road trip. And he has his girlfriend. And he's like, well, I'm not bringing her. I'm going to go single. I'm ready to mingle. And he's kind of a piece of shit, but it's just how he is. So they load up, they bring some drugs along with them, they get in the car ride, and within a span of movie time, and they try to make this sound like it's a day worth of driving, but from experience, driving from Louisiana even to Central Virginia is a 14-hour drive. So for them to go 5 hours, 6 hours more north, that's basically a whole day's worth of driving nonstop. It's unbelievable, but it's in the movie. And they end up in New Jersey by nightfall. And there's a time lapse where they're all hanging out, rolling up doobies in a van, kind of like the Mystery Incorporated. I don't know if that's supposed to be a gag or something, but it is just in the film. They end up at this gas station. They're looking around for an attendant for help because in New Jersey, an attendant has to pump your gas. It's a thing, I guess. I've been there, so I know. And Patrick Renna's character kind of wanders off, and they end up having this weird interaction with this gas station attendant. But when he comes back, Bill, his character, brings back a pamphlet for this dark ride attraction that's been closed for apparently 20 years at this point. So the movie goes from being a decade jump to a 20-year jump at this. It's kind of a small detail, but it's really annoying that it's there. And they're like, hey, maybe we should go see it and make a detour. And Bill comes up with this idea that they should spend the night inside of the dark ride so they don't have to pay for a hotel. And everybody seems to be on board with it because it's free and they're kind of thrill seeking and they're looking for fun on spring break. Well, during the ride, they find this hitchhiker. I think her name is Jen. They end up picking her up, and she's like this hot blonde, free spirit type, and she has this weird backstory that's really overplayed and kind of overacted, but it's in there. And the characters are like, hey, welcome aboard. We're going to go stay at this dark ride. You can come with us. And she's down with it because she has this crush on, I think the guy's name is Jim. I keep forgetting his name, but I think that's his name. The guy with the van. They have this sexual chemistry, and I think she wants to explore that. So they end up at the Asbury Park Carnival, and they wander into the dark ride. And from here, the movie kind of goes as expected, but there is a cutaway of an event that happened 2 weeks earlier. If you remember Jonah, he was the killer in the beginning of the prologue. We see an update with him in a mental asylum with these two orderly cooks that are trying to, I guess, fuck with him. And they have some grisly demises, and Jonah perhaps escapes, possibly goes back to the dark ride itself. And all 6 of these college-age kids are now inside of the dark ride with an escaped Jonah that they had no knowledge prior, that escaped 2 weeks prior. And while they're in there, they start to get creeped out. And I will say the atmosphere is really good here. It's very immersive, and they are just smoking some doobies, having a good old time until the bloodbath and the carnage ensues. And there may or may not be a baby-faced killer because there's a figure inside of the dark ride that had its face cut off, and we see shots of what appears to be Jonah wearing this mask. We know who the killer is, kind of walking around stalking these people. And the bloodbath starts once the character Steve may or may not get off-screen killed in a way. This sends all the characters into a frenzy. They had already split up because Jen and Jim decided to go get their little freak on. And while Jim is receiving oral sex from Jen, we see a kill mid-blowjob. Which was fucking eye-dropping, right? And they start coming up with commotion. And Jim screams. Of course, Bill, he's running a different direction. The 2 other girls, I guess the final girls, they're getting split up as well. And you start to see certain characters start meeting the axe. Well, because this commotion is going on inside of the dark ride, it has brought upon police officers to want to come out and investigate. And let's just say one officer dies via a graphic head split. Meanwhile, some of these college kids suffer grisly fates. There's a certain kid that gets killed off screen, but it's implied that she had her throat slit open. There's a decapitation. I'm not going to say exactly who died there, but it may or may not involve the oral fellatio going on prior in a very graphic way. And there's also another kill that comes later on in the movie when there's a revelation with one of the characters, one of the main casts that we got to know throughout the movie. It recontextualizes the events prior, and we see the sole survivor character, I'm not going to spoil who it is, kind of get away and suffer from the trauma of it all. And we also get some context of perhaps what the story is going to constitute in the future. And that's all you really need to know about Dark Ride to get a gist of what it's about. So, yeah, this movie, what I loved about it, it was a short and sweet 95-minute movie, roughly, and it flew by. You would be shocked by how well-paced this movie is at times. I think the main selling point to this movie, all said and done, for most of you out there, especially if you're slasher connoisseurs or just carnival horror connoisseurs, is the atmosphere to this movie. This movie's atmosphere is electric. And I looked into it. This film had a $5 million budget. They put a lot of the budget here, either into getting, side actors for a decent amount like Patrick Renna, or they put the money into production and trying to build up this dark ride, whether they built it on a set, which they probably did. It doesn't matter because it looks incredible. The lighting in here looks fantastic. And the atmosphere is oozing. And this also should be said, the kills in this movie, when they are on screen, are brutal, gory, and very violent, and very creative, too. There's a kill, like I said, I might have kind of given it away, but it involves oral fellatio while it's occurring. I never thought I would see that in a movie in my life. And this movie brought that in a gory, fun motherfucking way. There is maybe some twang of CGI at points with a kill or two, but it's not overdone. You would think that a mid-2000s movie would have CGI in there. This was starting to become a trend, unfortunately, for slashers, especially by 2009. But this does have mostly practical effects. So if you're a gore hound, there's plenty of gore in here. Now, you should know there are some off-screen kills in this movie. So there's a good blend. There's about 5 on-screen. Some of them are fun. Some of them are kind of basic. And then there's about 4 off-screen. So there's a decent body count in this movie for a slasher. You want to think that, but yeah. I think the characters in this movie remind me, if you're a massive fan of Friday the 13th tropes with characters, especially like the classic 80s run, even the remake for that matter, where all the characters feel like this group of kids that are friends and they're just kind of living that slice of life moments. These characters, this is one of the only times I've ever found a movie that pretty much nailed Friday the 13th tropes with the main cast. I mean, down to them being pot smokers, down to the humor. There's surprisingly funny motherfucking moments in this movie, particularly with the character Jim, the guy who owns the van. When he first meets Jen, there's a scene where he's rolling up a doobie and he has his mouth open. And she's telling the story, and as the scene goes along, you see the doobie slowly enter his mouth and start drooping. I don't know why it was edited that way, but that scene is fucking hilarious, and it made me laugh out loud. And a lot of these kills are so extreme and fucking kind of shocking that it makes you laugh. Like the oral fellatio death is fucking gnarly, but it's also hilarious as shit. There's something about it that makes me laugh. I mean, and there's certain parts of the movie that I don't know if are intentionally or unintentionally funny, but there's a whole scene where Jonah the killer with the baby face mask, he's stalking this girl and he's hanging upside down like fucking Peter Parker. I don't know what it is about that scene, but it made me genuinely laugh by how just dumb it is. It's dumb fun, and this is the kind of movie that I think I more so am gravitated to nowadays, especially with like horror slashers. This kind of reminds me in a lot of ways why I love Thanksgiving, but this came out obviously, 15 years before that, almost, plus. So, I love the charm to this movie. The atmosphere is oozing. The characters, like I said, they're kind of stock, but they're funny enough, and they do their job well. I think there is some creative cinematography here, even though they do kind of overutilize some weird camera techniques. Like, there's a couple of, editing sequences in the movie where you see the main character played by Jamie Lynn Sigler, the final girl. She is rotating around a room and it's slow-mo, and you see this a couple of times, and then you see, of course, that weird editing choice they did when they were trying to lapse time going from Louisiana in the van all the way up to New Jersey. That's weird. But there are some creative shots here, and I will tip my hat to Craig Singer, and there's some really good ideas here in terms of like setting up kills, and yeah, it made me get invested into this little, low budget, relatively Carnival slasher, and I have to tip my hat to them. They made something kind of memorable here for me. However, there are some problems with this movie, and I'm going to say this. There's 3 things that make zero motherfucking sense in this movie. Absolutely no sense. Let's start off with the first thing. I already brought this up about the prologue saying it's 1989. Characters, they don't know what fucking time they're living in, apparently, because some characters say it happened a decade. Some things that are written say it happened a decade prior. And then later on in the movie, they're saying these events happened 20 years prior. So is this film 1999 or 2009? If it's 1999, characters in this movie have mid-2000s cell phones. There ain't no fucking way. Cell phones in 1999 were starting to get more modernized, but they did not look as condensed as those films. I'm sorry, it's not fucking believable if it is 1999. It's very lazy if it is. The second thing that makes zero fucking sense is how the hell they go from Louisiana to New Jersey within a day's time. It's well overlooked in the movie. It makes no fucking sense. The third thing that makes no fucking sense. There's a revelation at the end with a said character, right? And if this movie takes place in 1999, sure, that's believable, given the context of what's shown in a flashback, essentially. But if it's 2009, I'm not buying that shit. I'm not buying that shit, and I don't want to give it away. But yeah, like I said, writing is not this film's greatest strength. And, I'm not saying that, slashers from the 80s had holes in plots. Trust me, they're out there. But this movie has quite a few noticeable, lazy points. And I don't know, maybe they were making it up as they go along. Maybe the actors genuinely forgot the time period and they just didn't fucking care. They're on, a shooting schedule or something. And they didn't have time to edit the shit. I don't know. But they could have made the story a bit more fucking coherent here. On the final product, and that did get annoying after a while. Those three things do not make sense whatsoever, because the story doesn't try to tie it coherently. The second negative to this movie is that there are a lot of slasher cliches full blast in here, and wow, that's not a big negative in the slasher genre, because slashers are kind of within themselves. The more they play into them, the more fun they are. In this case, it is fun. But there is points of the story that kind of feel beat for beat, like things you come to expect. The characters aren't that riveting, so it becomes like you're waiting for these points to happen, more so than being excited and writing the events along with the characters. Which plays into another negative with the movie. To me, what makes a good slasher movie like Thanksgiving, not only you have fun characters and they're relatable, and they kind of exist outside of a caricature a little bit sometimes, or a lot sometimes, but there's this addicting element to it, this enduring thing about it, where you build up suspense, you build up a genuine mystery, some intrigue about it, and like I said, you don't need to know, or not know in this case, the slasher identity to make it scary. Sometimes you can know who the killer is and still have fun with it, i.e. Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, or some slasher movies that openly show who the killer is pretty early on in the movie. That's fine. In this movie, we know who the killer is. It's Jonah. Jonah is this masked killer, but we never actually understand when this phenomenon of killing started. All we know is that he killed these two girls in 1989. He got sent to an asylum and he escaped, and now he's starting to kill again. What is prompting him to kill people? And that, it also doesn't make much fucking sense near the revelation of this other character when they go into a backstory that may involve Jonah, that maybe this phenomenon was happening before the events of 1989. You mean to tell me that nobody saw people go missing in this public park for that amount of time, and they just so happened, after these two girls got killed, arrested this guy and sent him to an insane asylum? There's stuff about it that feel forced and not organic, and it doesn't make that. It doesn't make it that. I don't know how to put it. It doesn't make it that poignant as something like a Thanksgiving, right? And sadly, since it doesn't have a whodunit angle, the last negative I have with it, even though, like I said, not every slasher has to be a whodunit for me to love it, there is a mild whodunit element with a certain character that recontextualizes events within the movie. And this character possibly is involved with some off-screen things involving certain deaths of certain characters. This stuff feels left field as shit. I don't care if people want to say, oh, this is just a predictable slasher element. I get that, but this said character and this revelation with said character, I didn't really like for the movie. And it was almost obvious to the point that I kind of figured they would be involved because of how little screen time they were in for a good majority of the movie. But yeah, I'm not really sold that I like this idea, and especially the angle of the ending. There's no real warranting of this, and you don't really get a full sense of this character and why they decided, I guess, to help. It's just there. And this kind of reminds me, my last negative, I guess. I do have another one. There's points of this movie. You have the prologue. Then there's like a 20-25 minute skip until a next group of kills, which is fine. You're setting up characters and all that. But then there's, from that point, another 25-30 minutes of just slice of life, pot smoking horniness that just eat out runtime until the first of these college age kids actually get killed, and they get killed off screen. There are points of the movie that feel very dry, that feel very slice of life. It's kind of meandering along, hobbling along, trying to fill out a runtime. And it can be boring at times. Surprisingly enough, for an atmospheric carnival movie, it does have its boring points and its long stretches of nothing happening. Not saying that every slasher needs to be in your face and gore heavy all the time, but I will say this. The final 30-ish, 40-ish minutes, that's where all the gore dumping is in the movie. Give or take some off-screen things, like I said, but that's where the most fun you're going to have in this movie comes out of, I feel. But yeah, but that all said and done, Dark Ride. I was actually pleasantly surprised by how much I liked this movie, and that turn your brain off, classic Friday the 13th type of way. And I love the fact that I have another 2000 slasher that can come back to, because I will come back to this movie. There's something about it that's endearing. I might make this an annual summertime watch. I'm not too sure. But is it the greatest movie ever? No, it has some severe problems. But I think it's a style over substance movie. If you want to lay into it and pick it apart, you sure can, in that Halloween 6 Curse of Michael Myers theatrical cut way. But if you give yourself to the atmosphere of it, if you just turn your brain off and have fun with it and ride the experience, it's more fun that way. And I was able to do that with this movie. So surprisingly, I would recommend this movie, and I actually think it's a good movie for me. And like a mild so bad it's good way, but I think there are some genuinely good elements about it. But I'm going to give this like a low good, not be too generous with it. I'll probably give this like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is definitely a rewatchable film. I enjoyed myself probably more than I should have. But yeah, if you haven't seen Dark Ride before, you should really go watch this movie. I think there's something in it for everyone, especially if you're a fan of turn your brain off classic 80s slashers and you want some more modern films that kind of fill that void. Go try this. And if you're a fan of carnival horror movies as well, you should go try this just for the ambiance and atmosphere alone. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Dark Ride. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this movie before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.